You're listening to the Fantasy Wildcard Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard Dynasty show in what is officially NFL Draft Week. I am so excited. I am Ali. You can follow me on X at FF Dynasty Grill. And with me as always, well, I say always, it was just Kev last week, but we are back. The band is back together. Kev, you can follow Kev on X at the Dynasty Mind. Kev, how are you doing tonight? And are you as excited as me that the NFL Draft is finally here?
I'm absolutely loving it, honestly. 2 days before the NFL Draft, it's finally come around. It's going to be over so quick. Story of my life. Such a great show we've got in store tonight. It's our only pre-rookie mock draft. So, yeah, we're going to make sure we're bringing the fire and getting it right for you. But a lot can change this week. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing really good, thank you. I was gutted to miss last week, but you done amazingly. Wonderful show. And, yeah, cannot wait for what we're going to find out this week, where all these players are going to land. We're going to be so wrong about all of them, which I can't wait. But yeah, with that, we'll bring in our other amazing co-host, Mags, who's bringing the fire with the red background. You can follow him on X at Hot Seat Mags. Mags, how are you doing? And what is your excitement level out of 10 for the draft?
Oh, I'm doing absolutely great. It's draft week. Cannot wait to get stuck into this mock draft, even though I've been doing it since October. Can you believe it or not? I've been doing mock drafts for this draft class. Can't wait to get stuck into this one, the last one that I'm going to do and we're going to do before the actual NFL draft, where we all rip up our notes from October onwards and start again. But that makes it more fun. How you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, absolutely. Just so excited. We've saved the best guest to the last as well. Can't wait to bring this guy on and go through a rookie mock tonight. So on tonight's show, we welcome on the content creator for the Amazing Football Guys and the amazing Devy Royale. So we give a warm wildcard return to Jay Stein, who you can follow on X at _Jason Stein. Jay, how are you doing, my friend? And can I get your excitement level for the NFL draft?
1,000,000 out of 10.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. I don't even know. Maybe I need to take the whole day off or what, but Thursday cannot come here soon enough. I'm super excited, and thank you for that intro. I'm not sure I deserved any of those amazing things you said, but I appreciate all of that. And yeah, I'm just super excited. You know, we spent a lot of times. You guys know, you guys have put in a lot of work on learning these rookies and figuring out their, looking at their college profiles and just, figuring out what kind of players they can be. And then we get the final piece of the puzzle on Thursday. And I just can't wait to get this going.
Yep, certainly said it all there. And as you mentioned before we came on, you run a lot of mock drafts. So I bet you're just excited just to get finally to the NFL draft, to get that ADP data and to see how it changes pre-draft to post-draft, because there will be some big changes. I can't wait to see who gets who we say will be a reach, and then sort of the values that come of it that drop perhaps into the second round. But yeah, tonight we are going to be completing a 2024 pre-draft rookie mock. So this will be super flex format, non-tight end premium. Jay is going to take the odds and the wildcard members are going to take the evens. We're going to go 2 rounds. Hopefully we'll get 2 rounds. But yeah, starting with the 101, we're going to give it to our guest, Jay. Who is your pick at the 101? Because I am pretty fascinated to find out who this is.
I think the first 2 slot positions, I think you can make a case either way. So one or the other. And I'm not going to fault you going either direction. I think that, though, in Superflex formats, I think you have to take Caleb Williams, the quarterback, because of the positional value. So I'm going to grab Caleb Williams, even though, as you just saw in Sleeper, that Marvin Harrison now is kind of eking its way above Caleb Williams and ADP. My reasoning here is, and you guys know Caleb Williams as a prospect. I don't need to go through that whole spiel or anything like that. But the reasoning here is when I think about the value that you can get from Marvin Harrison Jr. or Caleb Williams from a positional perspective, who next year, if I'm looking at next year, who am I going to select first in my Superflex startup draft? Am I going to select Marvin Harrison Jr. first, or am I potentially going to select Caleb Williams first? And I think Caleb Williams has the upside to be that guy that's maybe 1.03, 1.04 in Superflex next year. And from a value perspective, I want to grab that guy, because then if I, for whatever reason, decide that I don't think that Caleb Williams is that good, then I can move him for more assets than potentially Marvin Harrison Jr., who, if he has the best possible outcome, will probably still trade slightly around where Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or CeeDee Lamb trade, which is more so to the mid of the first round or to the back of the first round. So that's how I think about it from a value perspective. In Superflex formats, it makes sense to grab that QB because of the positional value. Even if Caleb Williams doesn't have like the ridiculous season we're all hoping he does have, I think he's going to hold positional value and still be in the top of that QB rung and go pretty high in Superflex startup drafts next year.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it any better myself. He's the 101 for me in Superflex formats. You know, for all the reasons that you've said. I think the prospect himself, Caleb Williams, is amazing. One of the best prospects we've seen of the last several years. Certainly in the top three. Marry that up with the fact that he's going to land in a very nice position with some really good weapons in Chicago. They look like they've finally turned it around, and they started winning games at the end of last season. The defense came on. They've obviously got Keenan Allen now, which is going to help an absolute ton. And then you look at mock drafts, and they're being mock draft Rome Odunze at that the second pick in the first round. A lot of the NFL experts are saying that they want to get a wide receiver. So if you were to add someone like a Rome Odunze to that trio of wide receivers, it's the best position that a quarterback has probably come into in, well, my time in fantasy football. So yeah, definitely positional value. Yeah, I think this time next year he could easily be a top 5 startup pick, which, as you mentioned, is definitely going to be higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. Even if he hit his ceiling, you're talking about someone that will be middle of the first round at his absolute peak. So, yeah, very much agree with the pick.
Here's a phrase that no one said for a while. I can't wait to watch the Chicago Bears next year. I can't wait. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. From a fantasy point of view, Justin Fields was pretty nice to watch, but from an actual NFL point of view, they've been disgusting to watch. So, it'd just be nice to see them compete and just not be so pathetic, because that fan base deserves a little bit to cheer about, at least. So we'll move on to Kev's pick at the 102. So Kev, are you going to surprise anybody here, or are you going to go for Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I mean, I think I'll surprise Jay, and it'll be a nice present for him at the 103. I am going to pick Malik Neighbors. I think it's with the disclaimer that if the draft pans out as I think it will do, with landing spots, which would be Harrison to the Cardinals, Neighbors to the Giants, this is going to flip, because they're in the same tier. I use landing spot to determine where I would rank someone within a tier. And if that happens, then it would be Marvin Harrison here. And I think you can make tons of arguments for Harrison that he's more favoured at market. So you could use that as a tie break, for example, because you're going to have more interest if you're ever looking to trade him and his insulated value. But yeah, just purely playing out my board as it would be right now, Malik Neighbors is the pick. I think there's not a lot between them. People will probably gravitate towards Harrison because of who his dad is and being from Ohio State, but Neighbors has done fantastic as well. He's almost a year younger than Harrison. And I think that he's not anywhere near his potential yet. I think you can argue and say, yeah, Harrison is a better college prospect, but I just feel Neighbors has got potentially even more ceiling than Harrison. A caveat that there is a little bit more risk there as well, but I just love the prospect. I think he wins in a number of ways. He can win from any alignment, slot outside, fantastic after the catch, someone that I think is going to be a nightmare in the NFL. Like wherever he goes, I'm not pumping the brakes on him. But yeah, I'm taking Neighbours here, and it's a nice little gift for you, Jay.
We are friendly to our guests on this show, and Kev, you've certainly been definitely friendly with this pick. But I mean, I can't slate you for it. I think Neighbours is in the same tier as Marvin Harrison Jr. for me, so there's really not much between them. I absolutely love Neighbours as a prospect. Would be talked about so much more if it hadn't been for Marvin Harrison Jr. in this draft class. He's one of the best wide receivers we've seen, period, in the last 5 years. So he's up there with the best prospects that we've seen. So, and I think the range of outcomes, as you mentioned at the start there, Kev, if he was to go to the Giants, which I've mocked him to do that today, I think he could possibly be falling behind perhaps the next two quarterbacks in a lot of real rookie drafts, just because of the people won't like that landing spot. But so yeah, there's a range of outcomes with Neighbours. He's definitely got the ceiling, and yes, slightly lower floor perhaps than Marvin Harrison Jr. But yeah, I love this pick. He's my 103 in Superflex, so yeah, can't slate you at all for that. We'll move on to the 103 and back to you, Jay. Is this an absolute layup for you?
Yes, absolute layup. I'll go Marvin Harrison Jr. I am a Buckeye homer. No, I don't want to start my conversation like that. Marvin Harrison Jr. is, again, like a really good prospect. I'd say, you know, and this was the same with you, Mags, on the hot seat in January when we did this. Yeah. We had Marvin Harrison, and I had Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbours in the same tier then, and I had Roe Odunze in a tier below. And that's how I still see it. There's nothing that's changed there. But I do think that the draft talk has got all three of those guys in some sort of similar tier or close enough where, you know, like if I don't get Harrison or I don't get Neighbours, I'm happy with Rome. And that's not how I feel. I feel I need to have Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbours slightly above Rome, or quite a bit above Rome, to the point where I need something like substantial, like a second or something. I don't know when you're trading, but I need something to move off of those three. There would need to be some sort of compensation to get down to Rome from that perspective. So that's how I'm sort of looking at it is, yes, Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbours are in the same tier. I'd tier Marvin slightly above Malik Neighbours, and that's how the data model that I do has it. And the reason there is basically Marvin Harrison had 2 years of elite performance. So his sophomore and junior year were elite, and Neighbours had 1 year of really good performance, like of meeting the age adjusted thresholds, and then 1 year of elite performance, where that elite performance, granted, was better than Marvin Harrison, but I'm just taking the 2 years of elite performance over the 1 year of elite plus one really good. So that's kind of how I would parse the two, but I do think that they're both in that top tier, and a decent jump between or fall between those two and then Rome, from my perspective. So all the placing these three guys, which I do think Rome's going to be a good player. I just think there's going to be a difference between the two, and those guys that are, I've seen this in a few mock drafts, that are taking Rome above any of these two guys. That's the caution point that I'd have, which I've seen quite a few times. It's happened. I've done about 60 of these rookie mock drafts, like one a night for a very long time, and Rome's gone at 3. 4 times now of the 60 times. So that's what I've cautioned against. That it's just those two guys are in that top tier above Rome.
Didn't know Rome's mom had sleeper. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, well said. And yeah, I completely agree with the argument. I've got these two wide receivers in a tier above Rome Odunze, and this is a reason why I'll be taking them ahead of the next two quarterbacks that are on the list. I think he's widely anticipated to go to Arizona Cardinals. I think that's on. I think it would take a massive offer for the Cardinals to trade that pick away, just because I think they're certain that, other than the Patriots doing absolute crazy business and not taking a quarterback or trading out, then I think they're going to know that he's going to fall into their laps, and that potential stack with Kyler Murray is really exciting for Dynasty and long term in the NFL. So certainly got a lot of insulated value. We know the ceiling is there. The ceiling is the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty in the next couple of years. So absolutely love this pick. These 3 players are unbelievable. And I'm now very interested to see where Mags goes with this next pick. So Mags, I think I know who you're going to pick, but you might surprise me.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the player here on the board that has the most upside of any player in this draft, even including the 3 that we've picked already. I'm going to go with Jayden Daniels. The reason I'm going to go with Jayden Daniels is I'm sort of thinking about here, traditionally, if you're picking at the 104, you're a team that was just outside being the elite top tier team in your league, and you're probably 1 player away from becoming that ultimate elite best team in your league. And whilst I could go ahead and I could take a Drake May, I could take a Rome Odunze here, I think if you get a Jayden Daniels and you get it right with Jayden Daniels, then that pushes you over the edge and gets you to be a dominant force here in the league. And just I kind of lean naturally towards being more of a riskier player in Dynasty. So maybe if you're a more conservative player, then Drake May is the pick for you here. But for me, who kind of leans towards taking more of a risk, I'm going to go Jayden Daniels. I mean, Jay's already spoken a little bit about the importance of getting that, that consistency and avoiding that 1 year success, that late year breakout. That's kind of what we've seen with Jayden Daniels. But boy, if you thought Malik Neighbors' late breakout was good, Jayden Daniels is just as impressive, if not more. I mean, the guy was 3rd in the SEC for rushing, and that includes negative yards for sacks. Just a freak player. If he can link everything together, if he can bring his A game to the NFL, his upside, just like Deja Vu, we were saying this about Anthony Richardson, his upside is, 1-1 in terms of where he finishes in fantasy this year in terms of points scored. So I'm going to swing a big bat at Jayden Daniels, knowing full well that he could just take too many hits and be out of the league in 3 years. But I think it's worth it.
Yeah, completely agree. He's my next quarterback on the list, so I would have him above Drake May. I think there's only a couple of scenarios, perhaps. One that could play out in the NFL draft is if Minnesota end up with Drake May. That might push Drake May above Jayden Daniels. But the other one is perhaps if you are rebuilding, you've not got much in terms of blue chip players on your team, you might want to just play a bit more cautiously with Drake May, because I think the upside is there, but there's slightly less risk for the next couple of years, because we've seen Jayden Daniels get knocked out a fair few times in college, and then NFL players are bigger and faster. So you have to believe that the team that are going to be drafting him will protect him as much as they can. Perhaps he won't be as mobile as he was in college, but we've seen that he's not got the biggest arm. He's not as big as Drake May's, but it's absolutely adequate. His deep percent accuracy is unbelievable. You saw the stats from this past year. So he'd be my next pick. So absolutely love this pick here. And we'll move to the 105. So back to you, Jay. Who are you picking here?
I'm going to go Drake May. I'll say a few things here. So the Jayden Daniels pick seems to be about chalk. He seems to go at 4 in most drafts that I've seen. And then there's this grouping of Drake, Rome, and Bowers for what happens at 5, 6, and 7. Personally, I prefer Drake May over Jayden Daniels, even though Jayden Daniels had this remarkable last year in college. And one thing that does get missed is Jayden Daniels had a decent first year in college as well. So it's not a profile that's like completely 0, and then year 5 it does hit. Year 1 there were some like nuggets, and I think it was year 2 or year 3 there was 1 or 2 nuggets as well. So it wasn't a complete 0 and then nothing, but it is a very intriguing profile. And then you mentioned a little bit about the size concern, and I looked into a little bit. I mean, the guys that he gets comped to mostly are like Lamar type prospects or like RG3. First off, I think Lamar Jackson was just a phenomenal, like well above where Jaden Daniel was from if I was grading out him as a prospect. And then from like a size perspective, you have the concerns of like him getting hit. He is 6'4", 210. I believe his BMI is 25.6 or 25.5. And if you compare that to where Lamar and RG3 were at their combine, I think RG3 was 6'2", 223, so his BMI was 29. You remember like how people were talking about when he was running and getting injured and stuff like that, RG3? And Lamar, he weighed at 216 when he was at the combine. His BMI is 27.5. So we're talking about like a marked RG3 was 29, Lamar is 27.5. Jaden Daniels, his BMI is under 26. It's 25.5-ish type thing. So, there are a little bit of concerns from that. And so I think Drake May grades out as a really good prospect. And I think he's kind of gotten this, I don't know if we've like just talked too much about him or people want to like put other people in front of him, but Drake May has performed really well on most metrics that I can see. He's a young, early declare type guy. You can make arguments about who he's playing with, what conference he's playing in, all these sorts of things. But in all reality, when you look at metrics like QBR, adjusted yards per attempt, rush yards market share, he has a really good rush yards market share it wasn't like what Jaden Daniels did for 5 years, but Drake May for two of his 3 years, his first year he didn't play very much. For the 2 of his 3 years, those age adjusted metrics that you're looking for QBs that go on to be successful, Drake May was well above those lines. So I mean, basically for the 2 years that he started, he crushed a lot of those metrics that I have. And then from a tiering perspective, I actually have Caleb and Drake in tier 1 and Jaden a pretty decent sized gap, and Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy in tier 2. When we did our show, Mags, I had McCarthy down in tier 3. Well, I moved McCarthy up to tier 2 with Jaden Daniels. And the sole reason was at that time, we didn't know whether McCarthy was going to go back to school or come into the draft. And I used to proxy draft capital, I used this site called Mock Draft Database. And just basically, I don't know, it was middle of March or something like that, combine time-ish. JJ McCarthy went from being a fringe first-round pick to somebody that's going to go in the first round. And so his prospect profile significantly improved. And the data was always there. It was just low-volume data from McCarthy. So we weren't sure exactly what he could be. But if I'm tiering out these QBs, Caleb and Drake, I'm very happy to get Drake May at 5, 6, or 7. Like, I'd love for people to push up other guys like Rome, take Rome in front of Drake May, take all these guys. I want to grab the falling Drake May knife because I think it's a little bit overdone. And we'll see what happens on the draft. Now, if he falls in the draft and my draft capital assumption changes a little bit, then maybe I'll change my mind there. But the way I see it, I see Drake May being a top 5 pick here. Whether that's 2, 3, or somebody trades in and grabs him somewhere at 4 or something like that. I think he's going to be one of those top 5 picks.
Yeah, completely agree. I can't see a way that he falls past pick 4 just because I think there's them quarterback hungry teams in the middle of the first round that are desperate for a quarterback, and if he's available for them to trade up to, I think that's something that's going to happen 100 times out of 100. He's got all the tools to succeed in fantasy football. There's a few things not to like, but he's got the big arm, he's got the rushing ability. At his ceiling, he's a top 5 dynasty quarterback. So if you're picking here almost at the middle of the first round, you could be getting an absolute bargain in Superflex. And yeah, I've got him below Jaden Daniels, but if people are going to push, as you mentioned, Roma Dunze, or perhaps if it's tight end premium, Brock Bowers to come up ahead of him, then people are getting such a bargain come rookie time. Interested watching or listening to the Wildcard team, their podcast last night. Kev had actually predicted that Drake May will go second overall pick. So that is interesting, and we're going to lead on to his pick now. So Kev, Are you going back to the wide receiver well, or are you going to surprise us here? Because I know you are a JJ McCarthy guy.
I certainly am. I'm a JJ McCarthy guy. I'm not gonna take anyone else. It's JJ McCarthy for me. I just feel like people still haven't come around to the idea. Like the saying he's going in round 1. He could go as high as 2. Like we've seen that rumor doing the rounds. Do I think it's a true rumor? No, but yeah, it could go as high as 2. I think he's going to go top 5. I think someone like Minnesota are going to trade up for him. I can't see him making it out of top 10, like in any scenario. Look, you've got a guy here that people are going to knock him because he played on a great team, and we haven't got a true volumes like sample on him. Like, what are we doing here, people? Like, if he turns out to be a Brock Purdy, like in a system like Brock Purdy has, we're absolutely loving that. I think he's going to come in automatically as a potentially top 10 pick in the NFL, as someone that's going to be automatically top 20 QB in Dynasty. Even if he has a terrible season, he's going to still be a fringe top 20 QB in Dynasty. We've seen it with guys like Will Levis, who did nothing and went up in value. We've seen it with Kenny Pickett, who did nothing and went up in value. So, he's insulated for the next year. I think the only guy you could argue here is Rome Odunze, based on that you're looking for him to be a wide receiver 2 or a fringe wide receiver 1 immediately. But I think where people are ranking Odunze, that's where I think his ceiling is in a best case outcome. I think he's too high up in the rankings for me. I have him below Neighbors and Harrison. I don't have him as top 15 if I'm looking in the big spectrum of things at wide receiver. So I'm going to take the positional scarcity here at QB. I think people are going to say that McCarthy can't run. And yeah, do you know what? He didn't have a ton of rushing production in college, but we've seen that he has got some adequate wheels, looking at some of his testing metrics. And you know what? He's probably not a rushing QB because Michigan were winning all the time. He wasn't passing a lot. You get rushing opportunities as a scrambler when you're passing a ton. So, yeah, put him in a situation where he's throwing it 50 times a game. I bet his rushing numbers will increase. So give him McCarthy. People will hate it, but you know what? You'd have to take him 1-6. You can probably get him 1-8 in all leagues.
Well, yeah, you say that, and I think it's good enough when we do these mock drafts. But I think come actual rookie mock draft time, when the NFL is said and done, and he's gone top 5, he's gone to the Vikings, then I'll bet more than 50% than he's taken ahead of Rome Odunze. He'll be very much in this spot. And even if somehow Daniels or Drake May were to fall a little bit, if McCarthy gets picked up earlier than the 4th pick, then he's definitely in the same tier as these two guys. And people are just late to the party. I was late to the party. All my mock drafts, I was taking him behind Rome Odunze, but come draft time in the Superflex League, when there's money on the line, if he's going to be the quarterback to someone like a Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, I'm not going to pick him ahead of Rome Odunze that could possibly be wide receiver 3 behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. So, yeah, I think this is well worthy of the 106 pick. Yeah, definitely. So we'll move on back to you, Jay, with the 107. Who are you picking here?
I'm going to go Brock Bowers. I just mentioned on JJ McCarthy as somebody that was a stand for JJ McCarthy throughout the 2023 football season and 2022 football season, which is weird because I'm a big Buckeye fan, but I just go by the data and what I look at. I mean, his QBR for year 2 and 3 were met age-adjusted thresholds. His EPA per play for year 2 and 3 met adjusted thresholds. His adjusted yards per attempt, 9.1, 9.9, met the sort of in year 2 and 3 met the thresholds. Big time throw percentage was up over 6%. For his career. His turnover worthy play percentage was around 3%. In year 3, it was 2.9%, which is right around that threshold of where I kind of look for it. And his adjusted completion percentage was 76.4, which is, I'm looking for my thresholds around 72%, but pretty good. And then the PFF grading, like people that are watching the film actually like his film. I realized that you didn't get a very high sample size, and there's all these like stuff you can say about him, but I really like JJ McCarthy. Right now, in terms of like where he's getting drafted, it's pretty firmly at 9. 8.
Wow.
I'm sorry. It's pretty firmly at 8. I apologize. It's pretty firmly at 8, not above Brian Thomas Jr. Sorry. So I do agree though with your point though, is that like if he goes in the top 10, I think he's probably going to get pushed up. And so what we're doing is we're showing you what will probably be what happens here with JJ McCarthy. But I do like the JJ McCarthy pick. I'm a big believer in what he could be. There's definitely risk there with him. I'll move on to Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, I wouldn't say this is like a profile that we see very often. For tight ends in college, there's not very much production that you see from a tight end. So you have to do things like draft capital and athleticism and make that a big part of your model. There's very few guys that come in as freshmen in college at SEC programs or anywhere in the country and put up substantial stats as a tight end to the point where you're putting up stats that like maybe wide receivers would put up. And that's exactly what Brock Bowers did. So I'm excited for him as a prospect. I'm not sure where that like puts him in terms of like how we rank the total tight end landscape, but I think he's definitely in the top 5 as soon as he's drafted and he's in the league. And I think there could be a case to make him in that top 3 from a dynasty perspective, not redraft, from a dynasty perspective. For like just sort of the level of prospect that he has done. And Mags alluded to this, like I have this whole process where I look at draft capital and one of the inputs is age, so I'm going to sort of be a slightly lower on the Jaden Daniels, the Michael Penix, the Rome Odunzes, just because of that sort of age argument. I really prefer it's 15%, a little less than 15% in my model, but I really prefer those early declare type players. And there's a whole thing behind that. But, Brock Bowers fits that early declare mindset, and he produced in college, which you definitely don't see. And then, he's very athletic. I don't think he did any testing or anything like that, but you can tell. And he's going to get that first round draft capital for a tight end in a tight end class that we might not see tight ends go until, I don't know, the rest of the tight ends go until like the late third round. So to me, this year, there'll be one really high end tight end prospect and then a couple of maybes. Maybe they get late third round draft capital. And so if I need that tight end, that premium level tight end, that top 5 and tight end guy, then, there's going to be this scarcity for Brock Bowers in this draft class, I think. So this is about where I'd have him. I just want to pick, my whole point is I just want to make that pick it over Rome is what I'd say. As I'd order Brock Bowers one spot in front of Rome, put JJ McCarthy wherever you want, but that's in front of them, behind them. But that would be what I advocate for.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick, and I think there's no way that Brock Bowers falls to lower than 15 in the draft. I think the Colts sit at 15, and they would love to run the card in if he's still on the board. And yeah, just people, I hope that when they draft Brock Bowers in round 1, know that they're getting a safe asset rather than someone that's guaranteed to produce year 1, because obviously tight ends difficult. I know recently with Sam Laporta has produced big numbers year 1, but you cannot expect that every single year from tight ends. So what people are getting a very safe asset, which will be top 5 straight away. You look at the likes of Kyle Pitts, who produced year 1, but since then has produced very little. I know a lot of that's to do with the scheme, but the fact that he's still very young, people still have him as a top 5 dynasty tight end. So what you're getting is very, very safe asset with a very high ceiling, because we've not seen that production profile come out of a tight end from college in a very, very long time. So yeah, absolutely love the pick. And we'll move on to Mags, the man with the mood lighting. And who are you picking here? Is it going to be Rome Odunze finally coming off the board?
Yeah, this is the easiest pick of the draft. Is whoever has pick 8 I mean, you've got the easiest job in the world because for me, there are 8 clear-cut players that are in this sort of elite, quote-unquote, elite tier before you have some real questions about some other people coming up. So yeah, I'm going to take Roma Dunze. But I mean, people have talked about Roma Dunze a hell of a lot, but the thing I'm most intrigued about Roma Dunze is something you mentioned earlier, Ali, was if Roma Dunze goes to that Bears team and is behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and has DeAndre Swift to deal with and has Cole Kmet to deal with, what the hell do you do with Roma Dunze? I'd love to hear your boys' opinions on that, because if it's a case where, let's say, the guy next to him in ADP, Brian Thomas Jr., goes to the Buffalo Bills, do we have to have a serious question about Roma Dunze and how far he falls in the draft?
I love you, Max.
Yeah. I love the questions. And just imagine that scenario plays out and then Xavier Worthy goes to your Chiefs. And people go absolutely bonkers.
Let me pray to all the gods that are out there that are listening. Like, just, yeah.
I mean, my predicted mock draft today, I had him going to the Falcons, the pick before the Bears, which I think will be fun if he was to go to the Falcons.
That'll be the excuse the Falcons fans use to say when Kyle Pitts doesn't produce next year. By the way, can I just tell you that?
Well, and Drake London. Yeah,
no, and Drake London. That's the main one. Sorry, Drake London. I meant to say. I got carried away. Sorry.
Yeah, we've got a Drake London hater on the show. So yeah, I love the pick. I think, as you mentioned, that number 8 slot in these rookie drafts are just the easiest one, because you just pick the guy that falls to them. Because yeah, no matter how good the wide receiver next is, I think there is a big teardrop to this next guy. But I think this is really where the NFL, this is where our rookie draft starts, because there's no consensus now with the next few picks. So back with the 109. Back to you, Jay. Who are you taking here?
Yeah, I think, and I'll clarify here real quick. Like, what I've said so far might lead you to believe that I hate or I really dislike Roma Dunze, which is not the case. I do agree with you guys that there's a clear cut here, and Rome is being a top 10 pick likely is probably going to be pretty good, and it'll probably hit. It just doesn't look as good in my model as some of the other stuff. I have 3 guys here that I really like at this point that I'd tier above the rest of them. And that is Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas Jr., and Xavier Worthy. And for me, it's really, really hard to figure out which one of those ones I want to go. So I'm going to play a little gamesmanship here and not select the guy that I think is the best, who I think is going to be the best player. I'm going to select the guy that is going at the best, the right here from a value perspective, and hope to catch the next guy at my next pick. So I'm going to take Brian Thomas Jr. here, which I think is a little bit of a hot take, because I think most people would pick Brian Thomas Jr. here, and I think there's a better player than Brian Thomas Jr. here. Brian Thomas Jr. Is part of that LSU crew with Malik Neighbors and Jaden Daniels. And he really didn't do much his first 2 years. And then this year he really went off. He's like big, very athletic, like just has had a phenomenal off-season lead up into the draft in terms of what he's shown and sort of his rise up the boards. I think he's a consensus first round wide receiver. So from a draft capital perspective, that's pretty good. If he's going in the teens, if he's going in the 20s, I'm going to love that. That's going to look really good. The issue I have is that he basically hadn't done much until year 3, but he still is that early declare. So he didn't hit those high production marks early, but he did hit the production marks, and he wasn't early to clear. So I still really like the profile. It's just there's so much more uncertainty that comes with this. Brian Thomas is one of those guys where I'm going to be at the edge of my seat during this draft to see where he lands, because I think it could change a little bit about how I view and how I draft those 3 players that I mentioned, depending on sort of that landing spot. But I think right now, from a value perspective, Brian Thomas is who you got to take at 9.
Yeah, it seems to be the slight consensus is Brian Thomas is the next guy. It's the guy that I've seen most mocked here. The next guy. I think his sweet spot in the NFL draft is probably the middle of the first round, where you've got the Jaguars and the Bengals. I think back to back is where I think I could see him landing. I've seen him mocked there several times. I think that would be a nice landing spot for Brian Thomas Jr. And yeah, he's much of a boom bust prospect as I guess Xavier Worthy in a very different way. He can get deep. He can beat the defenders. He can run very fast in a straight line. Incredibly fast, 40 time impressive. Caught an absolute ton of touchdowns this season. So I think a lot of teams are going to love that and covet that speed and size. So yeah, I can definitely see him busting, but I can also see him being a top 10 or definitely a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty if he hits in year 1 and does get that solid draft capital in round 1.
One thing I'd mention, one other thing is if you are sitting at 1-9 through 112 or even the early second round, do what you can to get in the top 8 picks. I have a much higher likelihood of hitting a guy that matters in those top 8 picks from my perspective. So that's how I'd play that.
Yep, exactly agree. I've been trying to trade up into the top 8 picks. It costs a lot, and if not, I've been trying to trade down for multiple seconds. I don't like to pick the back of the first round, and it seems to go that every single season, but especially this year because there's a group of 5 or 6 that are in a very similar tier for me. Kev, very interested to see who you go with this next pick because I know you like the 2 guys that Jay mentioned. I think it's probably going to be one of those 2. So which are you going for?
Absolutely sweating in here, like.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Make it easy. Adonai Mitchell. He's good.
Yeah, I've been on edge for the past few minutes, knowing I've been put in a trap. But I think first of all, like just adding to what you both said then about like your draft picks, like please do not be trading 25 first to try and get like to the 1-9 to 112. Unless there's somebody out of that top 8 that's dropped that's an obvious value and going to be the last piece, don't do it. Like, if you're that desperate to spend your 25 first because it's rumoured to be a worse class, like, wait till week 4, week 5 of the season until you've got a potential better idea of your team, how it's going to look. And you know what? Let's say if you like, I don't know, Brian Thomas, rather than spend your 25 first now, wait till week 5 till you see he's actually decent and spend your 25 first and maybe a 25 second. Wait a little bit, pay a little premium, but then you've got that certainty that actually Brian Thomas is a baller. So that'd be just one thing I'd say to anybody that's looking to dive into the back around one, which would be pretty crazy in my eyes. But with all that said, we've come to the pick, built it up. And Jay's a smart guy because I've got both Franklin and Worthy above Brian Thomas, just straight up as well. I think they're going to be. Franklin would actually be even higher if he went round 1. I'm factoring in he's going to be a round 2 guy. If Franklin goes round 1, yeah, conversations will happen. But I'm going a roundabout way to this. I think Franklin and Worthy, they're actually similar players in terms of how I think they'll be used. Or how I think they can win in the NFL. I think they both struggle against press. Despite his 40, I think both Franklin and Worthy are fast enough to be deep guys. I think they're both Z receivers playing off the line of scrimmage where they're not facing bump and run. And I don't think either of them's big enough from a frame point of view to play too much in the slot. I think if you're putting them over the middle a ton, they're going to pick up injuries. So I see him very similar different builds, but similar roles in the NFL. With that said, I think Worthy's more risky, and I like risk. I think it's someone that's not done as much over the past few years as I would have liked. So Xavier Worthy's the pick. I think that elite breakout as a freshman, that was mightily impressive to me. If anybody plays Devy, or if you don't play Devy, he was going so high in your Devy startups a couple of years ago. The hype has faded a little bit. Various factors as to why he struggled with the QB, etc. And then this last season, he had another first round, in air quotes, wide receiver on that team in AD Mitchell, who's not great, but there's lots of mitigating factors. I'm shooting for ceiling. I think if Worthy lands on a team like the Colts, used as a Z receiver, complementary to a guy like Pittman, I think that's absolutely unreal. So, also for Worthy, if he did fall a little bit further, and I'm not just playing up to Mags because I like him, but if he did end up on the Chiefs, who do a lot of this motion before the snap, then again, that's pretty perfect. And people not the size, this is the perfect time for a guy like Xavier Worthy to come into the NFL where smaller guys are hitting. There's less physicality on the line of scrimmage than, say, 10, 15 years ago. So, yeah, I wouldn't be worried about the size. I'd be more worried if he's going to be used in the slot and not used as I alluded to then. But it's really close between him and Franklin.
Agreed. Yeah, I've got Franklin slightly above, one spot above Worthy, but very much in the same tier with them. Brian Thomas and an absolute stud that we've not mentioned on the show yet, but Worthy, Worthy as you mentioned, Kev, you're picking at 110, 111, 112. Just shoot for the upside. You're already a contender. If this guy hits, and there's certainly some landing spots at the back end of round one where he can hit, then his value is going to be enormous in a year's time. We saw what Tank Dell, someone at that size, was able to do this year. Balled out, then got injured, but he's still a top 24 Dynasty wide receiver asset. So if Worthy was to hit, the sky is the limit for Worthy. And as you mentioned, the NFL is now moving across to smaller players are performing really well. That speed, we've never seen it before. So I'm just excited to see where this guy lands and the offensive scheme that he lands in. Love him to go to the Dolphins because that would just be insane. But yeah,
he's definitely worthy the pick.
Definitely. Hey. We'll better move on quickly from that joke to the 111. Back to you, Jay. Is Troy Franklin going to be your pick?
Troy Franklin is my pick. As I mentioned, those three guys, Franklin I have as the top ranked of those guys. And this is my hot take of the draft. I actually have Franklin who's getting second round draft capital in the same tier as Rome, which is, I think, a fairly hot take after reading some of these like draft analysts that like Dan Jeremiah had him really low. A whole bunch of other guys have Troy Franklin really low. And they might have a better read on what his true actual draft capital is. What I've seen throughout all of this offseason has been late first, early second. But if it's really third, then I might change my tune on this. But if he really is early second type of draft capital, I think it's really a really great profile. And yes, size is a problem. Size is a problem for Worthy. I like Brian Thomas Jr. I like Xavier Worthy. I like Troy Franklin. Worthy is a very interesting profile because he had a historic freshman year. And then really good year 2, year 3 was actually pretty decent. But didn't live up to expectations. And it didn't meet necessarily all those age adjusted thresholds. I kind of liken it to a little bit like a Jordan Addison sort of profile where, like very early breakout, but then sort of falls off in year 3 a little bit from a perception perspective, but still like somebody that could go in the first round and is really, really good. And I don't think you'd have a problem having Jordan Addison on your team right now. He seems like he's pretty good. Troy Franklin is really gotten lost in the shuffle because his data profile is really good. Year 2 and 3 for him on a weighted dominator, reception yards per team, pass attempt, and EPA per play all meet age adjusted thresholds. He looks really good from a yards per route run. His ADOT is 12.8, so pretty decent. A full yard below Worthy, so Worthy's a 13.8, but 12.8 is close to that 13 range, which is what I'm looking for. He's not a yak per reception receiver guy. People may have concerns about like potential drops, but you can say that with Worthy and maybe even Brian Thomas Jr. from that perspective, and then pretty good film grades as well. So I love Troy Franklin. Like he gets knocked for his size for sure, and I agree with that. And then he it wasn't like just this great easy process for him. Like he looked a little weird doing some of the drills in the combine and stuff like that. But when you actually take a look at what the RAS scores ended up being, which is sort of like an average of all these testing metrics and how that works, the relative athletic scores, how that works with all the other wide receivers, his RAS score ended up being a 9.02. And Worthy, who ran the fastest time ever, but is a bit lighter, his RAS score was a 9.41. Like from an athletic perspective, like this is a really good prospect. So like all this garbage about like he didn't look like perfect doing the drills or anything like that. The testing stuff came back really well. So I do understand if he's not going to get the draft capital. So like say Dan Jeremiah is right and like he's not going early second, he's going to go mid third or late third, that does change things for me a little bit. But the profile itself looks really good other than being a little light from a weight perspective. So I like Troy Franklin. I'm going to be higher on him than most. And I'm close. I think he's very close to what Aroma Dunze is from a prospect profile. Rome being sort of the late breakout fourth year guy type of profile.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say it any better myself. I love Troy Franklin. He's so fun to watch. And I can't wait to see where he lands, and can't quite put my finger on where he could land because I wouldn't be surprised to see him go late round 1, but then also any space in round 2, I think he could possibly drop to. Was it Troy Franklin with the gauntlet that was a bit weird, where he was almost exactly running away from the ball to catch it, and it was not very much in a straight line, but he's my wide receiver 5. Absolutely love this guy, and I think I'm going to end up with lots of shares because of the likes of Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., that he's going to get pushed down to drafts. And then if he was to slip further into round 2, then he could slip even out of round 1 in rookie draft. So really excited for Troy Franklin and to end up with lots of shares of him. So who have we got? Is it Mags? It's Mags. The 112 Mags. Come on, save the day. Who are you going for at the 112?
Well, Ali, you're good lads. So I mean, it's between 2 for me. It is between Lad McConkey and actually, again, I'm trying to think about it in the same way I spoke about with Jaden Daniels. If I'm at 112, it's more than likely that I am one of the better teams in the league unless I've traded for this pick. So in the scenario where I have the 112 pick, which obviously all 4 of us on the show have quite a lot of 112s because we're all so good at Dynasty Fantasy Football. I'm probably going to go ahead here and take a Jonathan Brooks, actually, because the likelihood is that my running back room is looking pretty stacked, but is also, as we know with running back rooms, on tender hooks a little bit. They seem to fizzle out fast. So if I can go in and potentially win a championship, or at least have a roster that is championship worthy, and go ahead and get the best running back in the class, I'm going to do that. Jonathan Brooks is someone that's probably going to be able to sit under taxi squad. You can go ahead, you can use your Christian McCaffreys or whatever else you have in your running back room, and then bring in some new blood with Jonathan Brooks towards the end of the season or even next year. I think if he never got injured, Jonathan Brooks for me is easily the running back 1 in this class. So if I'm taking him at 112, I don't need to worry so much about what can you do for me now. I can worry about what can you do for me in the future. So I'm delighted getting Jonathan Brooks in here. And I don't know if it's controversial. Jay, you might be able to speak to this a little bit more, but I had Jonathan Brooks even ahead of Trayvon Henderson before Henderson didn't declare. I think he's that good.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think Trayvon Henderson is probably better than Jonathan Brooks, but I what he did in this year was just remarkable. And if he didn't have that injury, I think we'd probably have him close to where Trayvon Henderson tier would be. So I'd probably put Trayvon and then Brooks, but they'd be in the same tier for me, I think. I hate the argument of, I keep saying hate. I dislike the argument of like, okay, ACL is like the death knell. We've seen running backs come back from ACL injuries and they're not as prolific as they were year one after that, but year two, it looks good. And that might line up really well with where Jonathan Brooks kind of ends up. Like those rookie running backs tend to produce fairly well. But that year two maybe would be that year that he takes that step up, and that might line really well with, creating the most value from a pick. And Brooks right now is my RB1, but I would slot whoever the running back that gets selected in the second round in this 12 spot about. So I completely agree with your take here on Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, I can forgive you, Mags. Jonathan Brooks is in my top tier of running back. I've got Trey Benson slightly ahead of him, but these two could easily go in the first round in real rookie drafts if they get decent draft capital. So, I love the theory behind, if you're the winning team, shoot for the moon, because this could be talent-wise the best running back in this class. So if you're picking that at the 112, you're just gaining even more of an advantage over your league mate. So, yeah, absolutely love this pick. Kev, have we got time to go through round two quickly?
Of course we have, yeah.
Good man. Right. We're gonna fly through round two. We're gonna go 4 picks at a time, Jay. You're gonna make all these picks in round two. So can you give us the first 4 names that you would be looking at with the first 4 picks? Doesn't have to be in any specific order, but the first 4 names you'd be looking at round two.
So this gets into my tier 3, and I'll tell you the guys that I have here. I have Adonai Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, Jalen Wright, Trey Benson is that next sort of tier that I'd have. So Jalen Wright and Trey Benson.
Absolutely love that. So obviously, if I have to pick one of these guys to talk about, it would be Ladd McConkey. Because I'm a big Ladd McConkey fan. I've got him in the tier with the Franklin and Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr. What are your feelings on Ladd McConkey? Because of a lot of people are saying, he looks like a safe prospect. The production wasn't there in college. He's obviously got this nagging back injury. Is that going to set him back in the NFL draft? But perhaps if he was to sneak in the back end of round 1, early round 2, are you going to be high on Ladd McConkey coming rookie drafts? So
I have him in tier 3. So I'm decently high on him, but it's a not like the greatest profile. 4 years, never really reaching age-adjusted thresholds on like the volume perspective. Doesn't look that great. And then from a size perspective, he's 186, BMI 25.5. So he's not like the biggest guy, but he'll definitely fulfill a role in the NFL. And from what I understand, he is one of those guys that can come in and earn a decent part of an offense just for the kind of the way he plays. To me, he kind of like the Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson are all like of very similar standing to me. They all look very similar from a profile, except for the fact that Ladd McConkey's got has had that higher draft capital. But to me, all 3 of those guys kind of line up as some guys that are, sort of that smaller. They project to be a certain type of player. They never really produced incredibly from an age-adjusted perspective. Now, the accounting stats, you can make cases for any 1 year that one of these guys did look okay, but they all kind of fit in sort of a little bucket for me of guys. That being said, Ladd McConkey with the higher draft capital, he scores up a little bit higher in my model, and he fits in that tier 3 category.
Excellent. So do you want to make the next 3 or 4 picks? Would quarterback come into the play now, or are you still holding off the 2 next quarterbacks?
Yeah, so the 2 quarterbacks are Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and I don't like selecting them. One thing that I would say is that it's important to keep in mind that this is super flex, and if either one of these guys is a first round pick, I'm in. If they're not first round picks, I'm much less in. Now, I said that last year, and then as soon as the first round of the draft went by, I was like, I'm out on Will Levis. And the next day he was selected as the first pick in the second round. It's like, well, maybe I'm in. So if Bo Nix or Michael Penix are like that first first or second or, top 5 of the second round, then I'll consider maybe. But what I'd say is for the most part, I've kind of been pushing those guys down my board. But I think Penix is going at 2.02 or 2.03, and Nick's maybe just slightly a little bit later than that now. And that's kind of where people are valuing those guys. Right now, I'm not ready to take that risk. They don't show up as really good profiles, but I'm going to grab them at the back of the second round just to show kind of where they should show. So the next one I'm going to go with is I'm going to go Blake Corum, Audric Estime, Marshawn Lloyd.
Sea of Green.
Yeah, the running back run. And then I'm going to go Javon Baker.
Ooh.
A little bit lower down on your list.
Yeah, I had to type his name. And I couldn't scroll. I couldn't find it.
That's right.
So talk to me about this running back run we've got here. We've got 5 running backs in a row, starting with Jalen Wright, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, Audric Estime, and Marshawn Lloyd. Talk to us about who's your favorite value of those, and who's the one that you're targeting in your rookie drafts.
Yeah, so my tier 2 is Brooks, Wright, and Benson. So I want those guys, Brooks, Wright, and Benson in that order. And those are the guys that right now, before the draft, those are the guys that I have at a higher profile than the rest. Braylon Allen has been a guy that I've had a decent, from a metrics perspective, he shows up decently, but the film guys that I trust, those guys have been saying that Braylon Allen probably isn't it. So that's one of those situations where, like a Sean Tucker last year, where it looked really good from the numbers perspective, but people were saying whether it's the injury or whatever, and then he goes undrafted, and you're like, well, I don't think Braylon Allen's going to be the guy that goes undrafted. But that's the guy that I'm like most fearful of right now, even though the numbers tell me he's like decent from a running back perspective. But the point here is that all these running backs we're in tier 3 and tier 4 in my running backs here, and they are not as valuable to me as all these other tier 1, tier 2 guys from a wide receiver guys perspective. This is like a down running back class. So first tier, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Wright, Traylon Benson. Next tier, Blake Corum. I've been pretty low on Blake Corum, but like I can't ignore the draft capital piece of this. But I would just say that like I'd prefer not to select him. I think the value for me is Audric Estime, who is I like Lloyd too, and he's been rising up draft boards. I think he's Dan Jeremiah's 1 at running back. So that's one. Ooh. The TDR guys, the Devy Royale guys, are very high on Marshawn Lloyd too. And that's really what's driving that from my analytics perspective, because he didn't hit very many metrics. Audric Estime is a very interesting profile. Audric Estime reminds me of the profile a lot of Jonathan Brooks, where he came on this season and he's an early declare and he meets a lot of the thresholds that I look at, and he doesn't get the draft capital discussion, and he doesn't seem like he's anybody's favorite guy, but from a numbers perspective, it's not like too far off from what Jonathan Brooks was able to do in last year. And so he kind of fits that mold of the guy. He's going in third round, maybe late second, early third-ish range. So I think if you can get him, I'm putting him here at 2.7, but if you can get him in the third or the late second, that's I think the value that you can get from him.
I think if you get to see these running backs in person, right, and you line them all up and you only get to pick one, you're going to pick Audric Estime every single time.
I know a guy that won't be picking him. Definitely not in round 2. That's Kev. Not a fan of Audric Estime, eh, Kev?
I can't even see him. He's that far down my board, but I do actually think though that, like, I've seen the odds for the first running back drafted, and I'm not saying it's going to be Estime because it's like 28-1, but you know what? I think that the NFL will like him better than I do, and then I think consensus rookie drafters do as well.
Yeah, well said. So who are we going to round the draft off with? We've got 3 spots left. Who are you looking at the back end of round 2?
So we got to get these QBs in here. I'll just throw them in here. like I said before, I am not preferring to take the QBs. So let somebody else take them. Take a shot on somebody else. But I'll go Bo Nix and then Michael Penix. There's a lot of Penix over Bo Nix. I think there is maybe more upside from a Penix if he does hit than what Bo Nix's analytical profile could show. But I think Bo Nix has maybe got that lower floor or the higher floor than Penix. So if Bo Nix gets the shot and he's in the right situation and he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, what he can do, I'd say that, he could be, in that QB 24 range, that kind of upside. But in Superflex, you want to have that shot at somebody that's a starting QB because that is incredibly valuable. So as soon as he gets the starting QB job, we'll offload as quick as possible. But take it with a grain of salt because I would say the same thing about Brock Purdy as well. So I'd offload that as quickly as possible as soon as that he became the starter. So that and his value. So that's what it can. And then the last one, I'm gonna go. I'm having a hard time deciding between one of the many wide receivers that I can pick here. I'm gonna go with one that I don't know probably doesn't get talked about a lot. I'm gonna go with Jermaine Burton at here.
Ooh, love that. Someone that I think talent-wise is right up there with the top 8 wide receivers in this class, but some off-the-field issues. And I think just listening to a lot of the top NFL draft people, there's some teams that just have him off their board completely that won't be touching him. And I'm desperate to see him given half-decent draft capital, given a chance to show what he can do, just to see if he can get his career really on track. You're obviously a fan of Jermaine Burton as well, the talent that he shows.
Yeah, this was a Devy darling, and you talked about out the field issues. He had transfer from Georgia to Alabama. It didn't always click, but the profile, he's got a good physical profile. He's fairly athletic. It looks like he's going to be a third round guy, from what I can tell. And he's just sort of checks some of those boxes, like he those age adjusted boxes early on he hit, and so everybody was really on him after year one, and then it really never showed up again. There's a couple of things like EPA per play in year 3 and 4 that looked pretty decent, but for the most part, like it was a year one and then a bunch of nothing really, kind of falling off field issues, transfer issues. But you got the context. I guess you have to take into account. He was playing for Georgia and he was playing for Alabama, which generally have higher level talents. As far as like taking upside bets, I think Jermaine Burton's profile and a whole bunch of profiles that don't look incredibly great, he stands out as one that might have a chance.
Yeah, love it. I've not seen him drafted quite as high as this in the rookie mocks that I've done. But I love the fact that you've highlighted him as someone that if he gets given perhaps slightly better than expected draft capital, and marry that up with the talent that he's got, absolutely love it, because I think his upside from what he's shown on the field when he's there is unbelievable. So love Jermaine Burton at the 212. And that's the end of that segment. So we'll move on to the fantasy wildcard, where we now get our guests to pick their fantasy wildcard, the player that they think will improve their dynasty value the most in 2024. So we're looking for potential 2024 breakout performance. So Jay, who is your wildcard selection?
I'm going to go with Deontay Johnson, the newly minted Carolina wide receiver. Look, last year was not a good year for Carolina. Bryce Young did not have a good year. We have a new head coach in Dave Canales, who was the head coach, who's now the head coach. He was the Bucs offensive coordinator. He's largely credited for the resurgences of Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. So, Geno Smith basically out of the league, goes to Seattle, gets a shot. And he was the QB coach and passing game. I think he was passing game coordinator, but he's sort of credited for, that rise in Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. I think that's going to be a similar rise for Bryce Young. Bryce Young was somebody already selected this year. But he is one of my top picks to actually, Bryce Young himself is one of my top picks to actually gain some value this year. I'd say, from a what Deontay Johnson is perspective, he is basically he earns volume in offense. His target share is close to 30%. I looked up on NFL Next Gen Stats what his share of team air yards for the Steelers were for the last 3 years. In 2021, it was 32.48%. In 2022, it was 33.61. In 2023, it's 29.82. So he commands like a 30% share of team air yards, team targets. If he's on a team where the pass attempts and the weighting of how much they pass is higher than what the Steelers are, he's going to get more targets every game. And I just see this guy who commands a 30% of an offense, maybe being a part of the Carolina Panthers who have this new head coach and a pretty decent quarterback that I think he'll get him turned around this year. And then he commands 30% of that offense. Now I looked up last year, the Steelers from a run attempts perspective, they had 506 pass attempts, 487 rush attempts, and they were basically 51% pass, 49% run. The Bucs last year, that's who the Canales came from as an offensive coordinator. Last year, 568 pass attempts, 439 rush attempts. They were 56% pass, right? So if the difference there, if you go from 51% pass to 56% pass, it equates to about another 62 pass attempts. And if you give Deontay Johnson about 30% of that, that's another 19, 20-ish targets a year. So he's basically getting another, on top of what he's done already, he's basically getting another target or two, or half a target, like about another target per game for the whole season ish, a little bit more than a target for the team. So that's already a target hog, probably gets more targets, and will probably be a decent part of this offense. I think that my whole deal is like sort of the value of players and how they rise up KTC. And the prompt of this question was, who's going to be the highest riser in KTC. I actually set price targets. So I think Deontay Johnson can get up into that 5,250 range on a KTC basis, which is about 50% upside from where he is right now. And that puts him at the back end of where wide receiver 2 is. So like wide receiver 24-ish that's sort of the range that I have him as where I think he can get.
Yeah, I absolutely love this pick. I mean, first of all, we'll just caveat and say that we've had 10 wildcard selections this offseason so far. We've had 2 from the Panthers and 2 from the Arthur Smith Steelers. So it tells you everything you need to know about the fantasy wildcard selections. It's players on lesser viewed teams with that scope and that upside. And you're absolutely right. Wide receiver 43 at Keep Trade Cut. I'm old enough to remember the days when he was a wide receiver 1 cusp in Dynasty, like that top 12, 15 range. Not too long ago at all. He's 27 years old. If you're just looking at him in a vacuum, he's a fantastic wide receiver. He's got unbelievable open scores if you use that metric from ESPN. Who's now take it with a pinch of salt because players like Puka Nacua who aren't open and do well, but it just shows you that in an ideal situation, if he's getting open all the time, if he's commanding the target share, there's talent behind that to command targets. So I love the pick. I think he's a great bet to rise. I'm not quite there on Bryce Young, but if he can prove me wrong, Deontay Johnson will definitely prove me wrong. And I can't see any reason why, if it's basically a given, if Bryce Young progresses under a great offensive coordinator in Canals, if he can translate that over as head coach, Deontay Johnson's going to go up in value. Even if he's 28 in season, he's going to be the number 1 on a team with an ascending QB that's going to get a little bit more buzz than he's got now. So I think it's a great pick, and I'm really excited to see where we are in a year's time.
Yeah, perfect. And I just one more add there. I would say that the Panthers are likely going to select a wide receiver, and probably a wide receiver early in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And my comment is, if that pushes down Deontay Johnson's value even more, our price on KTC even more, that's even more of a chance to buy. So you don't necessarily have to buy right this second, but they select a high wide receiver, it might push it down even more. You can buy at that point too as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just absolutely love it. I mean, this time last year, the boys were asking me, who's your fantasy wildcard selection? The name that came out of my mouth was Deontay Johnson. So, Jay, you're a smart man.
We align. We're good. And we're just a year. We're just a year off.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm usually a year behind everybody else.
And that is the annoying thing with us having our wildcard picks. We leave it for the guests to pick their wildcards first, so we get the pick of the litter. Deontay Johnson would have been high on the list. I'm a Buccaneers fan. I saw what Dave Canales was able to do to Baker Mayfield last year, and I'm very upset when he left. I've always been a big Deontay Johnson fan. I've got so much shares of him in Dynasty, so I'm really happy to see him go and hopefully flourish with an improving Bryce Young. But wide receiver 43 on Keep Trade Cut, which is one place behind Lad McConkey. So what are we doing? Kev is absolutely laughing at that. What are we doing, folks? I think it's a great pick, and I can definitely see him. As you mentioned, he could, if he has a decent season, because he's not an old asset. He's not an old wide receiver. He could easily be a back-end wide receiver too in 12 months' time. So absolutely agree with the pick. And that brings us to the end of tonight's show, where we've completed a 2024 pre-draft rookie mock draft, and it's been absolutely brilliant. So before you go, Jay, please can you remind the audience where they can find you, and is there anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, you can find me at _Jason Stein on X or Twitter, and I do content for the Football Guys and the Devy Royale. For Football Guys, we're doing mock drafts every night, and we have ADP and trends up. I also do a series called The Dynasty Investor, which I've published a couple of pieces. I think it was in March. One was on rookie books, which I think was really interesting and probably worth a read in terms of like the value of rookie picks over the course of a year. We have the Football Guys Rookie Guide, the final third version, coming out as soon as the draft finishes. So I think that Monday it'll hit your inboxes. I do the analytics index in there. And then at the Devy Royale, it's a really cool Patreon. You get combined Dynasty and Devy rankings all in one shot. And we have a Discord where we have a lot of members and talks and discussions about there. I have my rookie rankings and stuff pinned in there, and all the data that goes behind that in there, which is a pretty cool resource for people to come and join. We have our Devy guide that's going to come out, I think, Monday as well, if not next week, but it's coming soon. And that's a must read if you're interested in Campus to Canton or Devy leagues, or even Dynasty, about who's coming up next, as good things to look at.
No, brilliant stuff. And I just want to say personally, massive thank you for coming on. And obviously you're incredibly busy. You've got lots of things going on. So I want to I'm appreciative of you coming on, spending what is nearly an hour and a half now with us, talking the pre-draft rookie mock, and just to see how wrong we are in a week's time. But no, it's been absolutely fascinating having you on. And is there any final thoughts from you boys? Start with you, Kev.
Yeah, I mean, just thanks for coming back on, Jay. Such a smart guy. And actually, from a selfish point of view, I feel a lot calmer now that you've been on, and a lot of my thoughts have aligned with yourself, being a little bit higher on McCarthy and the wide receiver rankings. I think it's really calmed me down ahead of some craziness we've got at the end of this week. But just everything you've said, it brings it all together for me at the right time of the year. And then obviously you mentioned all that great content. If I could pick out one piece that you mentioned of that Devy Royale Dynasty Devy rankings, it's unmatched in the community. Like, anybody that's playing Devy or looking to get into Devy, you need to be a patron of that, the Devy Royale for the rankings alone. It's going to give you such an advantage over your league mates. But yeah, just thanks for coming on, and you're setting up our audience to win.
Yeah, I mean, just Jay, one of my favorite guys in the space. You know it already, mate. So just always great to chat to you. Always come away from any conversation with you with a lot of new things and a lot of new tools put in the tool belt for Dynasty Valley football. So yeah, already looking forward to the next time we can chat, mate.
Yeah, thank you, Ollie, Max, Kev. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Like that, Mags. Tools in the tool belt. Absolutely love that. So yeah, with that, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us and subscribe on X and YouTube at Fantasy Wildcard and at Wildcard Dynasty, and join us for our show every single Wednesday of the off season. It's really hyping up now for the NFL draft this week, and we're going to react to that next week. So thank you once again. Have a good one, and we'll see you again soon.
When you have the wild card, you have the power to change the game.